The Galactic Coalition measured worth in durability. Every species that joined the Interstellar Alliance underwent centuries of observation, biological analysis, and environmental testing. Strength was not simply admired, it was quantified, categorized, and ranked. Species that could survive crushing gravity, extreme radiation, or corrosive atmospheres earned respect and influence within Coalition command. Humanity did not impress them. Compared to the thick exoskeleton of the Korthax, human skin appeared dangerously thin. Compared to the regenerative tissue of the Lyrians, human healing seemed painfully slow. Even the smallest Threx juvenile could endure radiation levels that would hospitalize an adult human within minutes. Coalition analysts documented the weaknesses carefully. Human bones fractured under stress thresholds many species considered routine. Their immune systems required constant protection from microorganisms. They relied on precise atmospheric balance and narrow temperature margins to function safely. The final classification report was concise. Species: human. Durability rating: low. Environmental tolerance: limited. Risk assessment: high. Operational category: Class F, fragile. The label spread quickly across Coalition networks. Humans were not banned from membership, but their roles were restricted. They were encouraged to participate in diplomacy, cultural exchange, communications, and design, fields where physical vulnerability posed minimal risk. They were quietly excluded from hazardous exploration missions, deep space military operations, and emergency rescue deployments. No official announcement declared humans unfit for danger. They were simply never invited. Most Coalition species assumed humans would protest the classification. Some expected political disputes or demands for re-evaluation. Instead, humanity accepted the verdict with unsettling calm. Humans continued participating in Coalition development projects, contributing innovations in software architecture, linguistic translation systems, and modular engineering design. Their scientific communities collaborated enthusiastically with alien researchers. Their artists shared music, literature, and visual media across interstellar cultural archives. If humans felt insulted, they did not openly show it. Coalition leadership interpreted this quiet compliance as confirmation of the assessment. Fragile species rarely challenged authority. Then the Andar Nebula mining disaster occurred. The colony had been established within a dense asteroid cluster rich in volatile energy crystals, materials capable of powering advanced warp corridors. Thousands of workers from multiple species operated deep inside reinforced tunnel networks carved into the asteroid's cores. 4 years, the operation proceeded without incident, until the crystals began resonating. An unexpected chain reaction destabilized the cluster. Energy pulses surged through the mining tunnels, triggering structural failures across multiple excavation zones. Entire corridors collapsed within seconds. Shock waves disoriented navigation systems. Radiation storms flooded the internal chambers. Emergency beacons activated automatically. Within minutes, the situation escalated beyond standard containment procedures. Coalition rescue teams responded immediately. Korthax heavy response units attempted entry, but could not maneuver effectively within the increasingly narrow debris passages. Lyrian medical teams deployed regenerative field stabilizers, but radiation surges interfered with their cellular repair capabilities. Autonomous drones lost communication signals within minutes of entering the tunnels. Survivors were trapped. Time projections estimated total structural collapse within 40 hours. Coalition Command analyzed possible rescue strategies. Every model produced the same conclusion. Probability of full evacuation was extremely low. That was when a human engineering delegation submitted a formal request. They asked for authorization to attempt rescue operations using adaptive equipment prototypes originally developed for high-risk planetary environments. Coalition risk analysts immediately flagged the proposal. Human survival probability was calculated at only 18%. Their biological durability did not meet recommended safety thresholds for radiation exposure or kinetic debris impact. The tunnels required extreme maneuverability under rapidly changing environmental conditions, parameters considered incompatible with human physiological limitations. Coalition Command hesitated. Rejecting the request would preserve human safety. Accepting it might offer the only chance of saving the trapped miners. After extensive deliberation, authorization was granted under provisional classification. Human teams began preparing specialized suits designed for rapid environmental adaptation. Coalition observers monitored their activity with cautious skepticism. Fragile species did not typically volunteer for impossible missions. Yet the humans worked without hesitation, calibrating equipment, refining navigation algorithms, and studying unstable asteroid schematics deep into their planet's night cycles. The rescue window was closing, and for the first time, the galaxy would soon witness what fragile truly meant when survival was no longer guaranteed. Coalition Command expected hesitation. Instead, the humans moved with quiet urgency. Within hours of receiving authorization, the human engineering teams transformed an ordinary docking bay into a controlled preparation zone. Portable fabrication units assembled modular exosuits piece by piece, each component designed for rapid adjustment under unpredictable conditions. The suits were not as thick as Korthak's armor, nor as biologically advanced as Lyrian regenerative fields, but they possessed something rare within Coalition engineering philosophy: flexibility. Each layer served multiple functions. Radiation dispersal fibers could shift density in response to energy spikes. Micro-actuated joints allowed full mobility even in confined spaces. Oxygen processors dynamically adjusted mixture ratios to match rising stress levels in the wearer's bloodstream. Instead of building a suit to resist every possible threat, humans had built one capable of adapting to threats as they appeared. Coalition observers gathered along the upper viewing galleries, watching the preparation unfold. Among them stood Commander Terex of the Korthak's Heavy Response Division, whose species valued structural resilience above all else. "These suits appear thin," Terex remarked to a Lyrian scientist beside him. "They are," the Lyrian replied, adjusting her sensory tendrils toward the data feeds. "But their internal systems compensate rapidly. They do not rely on static protection." "Static protection prevents failure," Terex responded. "Static protection assumes the threat remains constant," the Lyrian countered quietly. The human team leader, Captain Mara Ilian, briefed a squad in calm, measured tones. No dramatic speeches, no declarations of heroism. Instead, precise instructions flowed between team members, supported by real-time predictive simulations displayed inside their helmets. "Expect tunnel compression within the first 200 meters, Mara said. "Radiation spikes will likely occur near crystal veins. Prioritize path marking. Maintain continuous biometric monitoring. No one operates alone." Each rescuer acknowledged with a simple nod. They were aware of the survival probability calculations. They entered anyway. The transport vessel approached the unstable asteroid cluster under heavy electromagnetic interference. External sensors struggled to maintain accurate mapping as debris fields shifted unpredictably, fragments colliding and separating under fluctuating gravitational forces generated by the resonating crystals. Human navigation software compensated by combining Coalition star maps with adaptive pathfinding algorithms originally designed for Earth cave exploration. The system continuously re-evaluated viable routes, adjusting projected tunnel stability probabilities in real time. As the first team entered the fractured mining corridor, the difference between human physiology and coalition assumptions became immediately apparent. Where larger species required wide, stable pathways, humans maneuvered through tight openings with minimal obstruction. Their narrower skeletal structure allowed them to navigate passages partially collapsed under shifting debris. The first radiation surge struck 12 minutes into the mission. Energy pulses rippled through the tunnel walls, scattering particles that glowed faintly blue as they interacted with the suit's shielding layers. Warning indicators flashed inside helmet displays, recommending immediate retreat. Captain Mara recalculated. Adjust shield density to 70%. Increase dispersion frequency, she instructed. The suits responded instantly, redistributing protective fibers across high-exposure zones. Radiation levels stabilized just below critical thresholds. The team advanced. 40 meters deeper, they discovered the first survivors, a group of Threx miners trapped beneath fractured structural supports. The Threx possessed natural radiation resistance, but debris impact had immobilized them. Human rescuers deployed compact structural stabilizers, tools small enough to be carried on flexible harness systems. Instead of relying on heavy equipment, they used multiple lightweight supports, positioning them strategically to distribute pressure away from the trapped miners. Coalition observers monitored the operation remotely. Human heart rates increased significantly during the extraction process. Stress indicators rose across all team members, yet none withdrew. One rescuer crawled into a gap barely wider than their torso, manually attaching microlift modules beneath collapsed plating. Another adjusted suit limb tension controls to maintain leverage while supporting shifting debris overhead. The Threx miners were freed within 11 minutes. As the survivors were guided toward the evacuation route, Commander Terex observed something unexpected in the biometric telemetry. Human stress markers remained elevated, but performance efficiency did not decline. They continue operating despite physiological strain, Terex noted. The Lyrian scientist inclined her sensory tendrils again. It appears, she said slowly, that humans do not require optimal conditions to function. The mission continued deeper into the unstable tunnels. Each meter challenged the Coalition's understanding of fragility. Humans were not ignoring danger. They were adapting to it faster than the models predicted. By the 20th hour of continuous operations, exhaustion began to creep into every movement. Human bodies were never designed for prolonged exposure to radiation surges, unstable terrain, and extreme psychological pressure. Even with adaptive suits regulating oxygen levels and stabilizing temperature fluctuations, fatigue could not be fully eliminated. Muscles trembled under sustained effort, reaction times slowed by fractions of seconds, and hydration levels dropped faster than expected due to stress-induced metabolic acceleration. Coalition analysts observed carefully. According to standard biological models, efficiency should have declined significantly by this stage. Instead, human performance adjusted. They rotated responsibilities in short, precisely timed intervals. Navigation specialists became debris stabilizers. Engineers shifted into medical monitoring roles. No single individual carried the same task long enough for fatigue to cause critical error. The humans had not only designed adaptable technology, they had structured adaptable teamwork. Inside the fractured tunnels, visibility dropped as microparticles from damaged crystal veins filled the air. Suit filters activated continuously, maintaining breathable internal atmospheres despite fluctuating contamination levels. One section of corridor twisted sharply downward into a collapsed chamber filled with jagged metallic fragments from mining equipment. Embedded crystal shards emitted irregular pulses of radiation, creating interference patterns that disrupted coalition standard navigation signals. Human systems compensated by switching to manual triangulation methods derived from early planetary exploration techniques once used on their homeworld. Captain Mara Ilian activated a backup mapping interface. "Switching to tactile navigation markers," she said calmly. "Use line guides. Maintain physical contact spacing." Flexible cable lines were deployed along the tunnel walls, allowing the team to maintain orientation even when digital positioning data became unreliable. Each rescuer attached themselves to the guideline at measured intervals, ensuring that no one became disoriented in the low-visibility environment. Coalition observers noted the unusual reliance on physical redundancy rather than purely digital solutions. "Why implement such primitive methodology?" one Corthax technician asked. The Lyrian scientist studying the telemetry responded quietly. "Because primitive systems rarely fail all at once." Deeper inside the chamber, the team located a cluster of trapped miners from multiple species, Corthax, Lyrian, and Vethari, all immobilized beneath layers of fractured support structures. The Vethari, possessing delicate respiratory membranes, were closest to critical oxygen deprivation. Human medics immediately adjusted environmental support fields, carefully calibrating atmospheric composition inside the confined space. The modular suits allowed partial atmosphere sharing between rescuers and survivors, a feature originally designed for emergency terrestrial disasters. Radiation pulses intensified unpredictably. Warning signals flashed across every helmet display. "Exposure approaching tolerance threshold," one rescuer reported. Captain Mara paused only briefly. "Proceed with extraction sequence. We rotate positions every 2 minutes. No extended exposure." The debris required manual removal in tightly controlled increments. Larger species lacked the dexterity required to maneuver within the confined structural gaps without triggering further collapse. Human skeletal flexibility allowed them to position support braces precisely where structural integrity remained strongest. At one critical moment, a secondary collapse sealed the chamber entrance behind half the rescue team. Communication signals flickered, momentarily severing contact with Coalition command. Inside the isolated chamber, human rescuers switched seamlessly to independent coordination protocols. Hand signals replaced verbal communication when electromagnetic interference disrupted audio transmission. Biometric monitors tracked each team member's physical condition continuously, alerting the group to early signs of dangerous fatigue. Despite rising exhaustion, their decision-making remained structured. No panic. No disorder. One rescuer stabilized a fractured support beam manually, while another positioned microload dampeners beneath it. The maneuver required sustained muscular effort beyond recommended endurance limits. Biometric alerts warned of muscular strain approaching injury thresholds. The rescuer adjusted posture slightly, continued holding position. The trapped survivors were extracted one by one. Outside the chamber, Coalition observers noted an anomaly in the data patterns. Human physical limits were being reached, yet performance degradation remained minimal. They continue functioning under conditions considered operationally unacceptable, Commander Terex observed. The Lyrian scientist processed the data carefully. "It appears their biological tolerance is only one component of their resilience," she said. "What is the other component?" Terex asked. The scientist hesitated briefly. "Choice." Inside the collapsing asteroid, the human rescue team advanced further toward the deepest chambers. Fatigue was no longer avoidable, but neither was their determination. By the 32nd hour, the rescue operation had reached the deepest accessible sector of the asteroid cluster, a chamber surrounding the largest crystal vein ever discovered in the Andar Nebula. The crystals pulsed with unstable energy, emitting irregular shock waves that rippled through the surrounding rock. Each pulse shifted structural stress patterns unpredictably, causing microfractures to spread like invisible cracks in glass. Coalition projections grew increasingly grim. Structural simulations predicted catastrophic collapse within 6 hours. If the crystal core destabilized completely, the entire asteroid would fracture into thousands of fragments, scattering debris across millions of kilometers of space. Deep within the chamber, life signs indicated over 400 trapped workers. They were positioned in a section of tunnel partially shielded by a curved formation of crystal growth, the only structure preventing immediate collapse. However, the same crystal formation interfered with most standard rescue technologies. Automated drones failed to operate reliably near the energy pulses, and heavy excavation equipment risked triggering chain reactions within the surrounding crystal lattice. Human engineers studied the fluctuating readings carefully. The solution they proposed carried enormous risk. Instead of avoiding the crystal shock waves, they would use them. Captain Mara Ilian assembled her team in a narrow stabilization pocket just outside the main chamber. Their helmet displays projected a dynamic structural map, constantly updating as stress fractures propagated through the asteroid walls. "We redirect the pressure," Mara explained. "Controlled microdetonations along secondary fault lines. We shift the collapse path away from the survivor pocket." One engineer adjusted the simulation parameters. "If timing is off by more than half a second, we accelerate failure instead of preventing it." Mara nodded. "Then we don't miss." Coalition Command reviewed the proposal immediately. Risk models indicated a 72% chance of mission failure if the detonation sequence was mistimed. However, without intervention, collapse probability remained above 90%. Authorization was granted. Human rescuers prepared compact charge units specifically designed for low-yield directional force. Unlike military explosives, these devices focused kinetic energy into precise vectors, allowing structural pressure to be redistributed rather than amplified. Placing the charges required manual positioning within unstable fracture zones where automated systems could not function reliably. Each placement point existed inside narrow crevices formed by shifting crystal growth, spaces barely large enough for a human to enter. One by one, the team moved into position. Radiation pulses intensified near the core. Suit shielding layers adjusted continuously, redistributing protective density toward exposed regions. Internal cooling systems struggled to maintain safe operating temperatures as energy fluctuations increased. "Charge 1 set," reported Engineer Solis. "Charge 2 set. Charge 3 stabilizing." Captain Mora monitored the countdown synchronization carefully. The entire sequence required perfect coordination between 6 separate detonation points. Timing error tolerance, less than 0.47 seconds. Outside the chamber, the trapped workers prepared for evacuation. Human medics distributed portable stabilization harnesses designed to assist injured survivors through narrow corridors once the pressure shift created a temporary escape route. Final diagnostics confirmed all charges armed. Mara initiated the sequence. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. The asteroid trembled. 6 controlled bursts echoed through the crystal lattice, each precisely calibrated to redirect the structural stress waves radiating from the unstable core. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the tunnel geometry shifted. Fracture patterns curved away from the survivor chamber exactly as predicted. Sections of unstable ceiling collapsed inward along newly formed fault lines, opening a narrow corridor extending toward the extraction route. The evacuation began immediately. Survivors moved carefully through the unstable passage as the human team stabilized structural weak points along the route. Micro-support anchors deployed rapidly, reinforcing critical junctions long enough for the injured workers to pass safely. Halfway through the evacuation, a secondary shock wave struck unexpectedly, destabilizing a load-bearing column near the exit corridor. If the column failed, the passage would collapse entirely. Without hesitation, one human rescuer moved into position beneath the failing structure, activating suit-assisted load support systems to counter the shifting pressure. Biometric warnings flashed across the team's shared interface. Muscle strain exceeded recommended tolerance. Structural load approaching maximum support limits. Evacuation priority continues, the rescuer said calmly. One by one, the remaining survivors passed through the corridor. Seconds stretched into eternity. At last, the final worker cleared the chamber. The rescuer disengaged support at the final possible moment and retreated as the column fractured behind them, sealing the chamber permanently. Coalition observers watched the telemetry in stunned silence. Fragile bodies had just performed a task no durability-based model predicted possible. The turning point had arrived. The final extraction shuttle cleared the asteroid cluster just moments before the crystal core destabilized completely. From a safe distance, Coalition vessels observed the chain reaction unfold. The Andar asteroid fractured along redirected fault lines exactly as human engineers had predicted. Instead of a violent explosion scattering debris unpredictably, the controlled structural shifts allowed the asteroid mass to disperse gradually, minimizing the danger to nearby navigation routes. Thousands of lives had been saved. Inside the medical frigate Helios array, survivors from multiple species received treatment for radiation exposure, dehydration, and structural injuries. Coalition physicians worked alongside human medical teams, carefully analyzing biometric readings collected throughout the rescue mission. The data was remarkable. Human bodies had operated near the edge of their physical limitations for extended periods. Muscle fiber strain reached levels that typically required immediate medical recovery. Radiation exposure thresholds approached maximum tolerance margins. Cognitive load indicators suggested sustained high-stress decision-making far beyond recommended safety intervals. Yet failure rates remained unexpectedly low. Human rescuers had not performed without injury. Several required immediate regenerative therapy and structural support for strained connective tissue. But the mission's success metrics exceeded every coalition prediction model. Coalition Command convened an emergency review session within hours of the mission's completion. Representatives from 12 species gathered to evaluate the data. The classification assigned to humanity had not changed in centuries. Biological durability remained a primary metric in determining operational suitability across hazardous environments. Yet the Andar rescue mission challenged those assumptions. Commander Terex of the Korthax reviewed the recorded telemetry, focusing on the moment when the human rescuer stabilized the collapsing support column to allow final evacuation. The structural load exceeded their musculoskeletal tolerance limits, Terex stated. Yet the rescuer maintained position long enough for successful extraction. A Lyrian analyst expanded the cognitive stress metrics. Decision-making efficiency remained consistent even under extreme fatigue conditions. Emotional regulation indicators suggest high cooperative stability among team members. Another coalition scientist displayed environmental adaptability charts comparing species-specific performance across fluctuating hazard parameters. Humans demonstrated lower raw resistance to radiation and physical impact, but their response adaptability curve exceeded all known models. They compensated for biological limitations using rapid problem-solving strategies, collaborative coordination structures, and flexible technological integration. Strength, the coalition began to realize, could not be measured solely by resistance to damage. Strength could also be measured by response to vulnerability. When the formal reassessment vote was called, the decision was unanimous. Humanity's classification would be revised. The new designation would not emphasize durability alone. It would acknowledge the capacity to function effectively under unpredictable conditions, even when operating near biological limits. The updated record entered the Coalition archive. Species: human. Primary trait: adaptive resilience. Operational classification: Class A. Adaptive. The change influenced more than documentation. Coalition rescue doctrine was permanently updated to include human-led improvisational response units for high-uncertainty environments. Training simulations began incorporating human-designed adaptive problem-solving frameworks. Engineering divisions studied modular flexibility principles originally developed for Earth disaster response systems. Species once considered physically superior began requesting collaboration with human specialists in crisis coordination. The galaxy's understanding of fragility shifted. Human skin remained vulnerable. Human bones remained breakable. Human biological tolerance ranges remained narrow compared to many coalition species. But fragility, it became clear, did not determine outcome. Under pressure, humans demonstrated an unusual tendency to transform limitation into innovation. Where other species relied on natural resistance, humans relied on adjustment. Where other species endured, humans adapted. The Andar Nebula Rescue Mission became a case study distributed across coalition academies, illustrating that survival advantage could emerge from traits previously categorized as weaknesses. A single annotation was added to the final report summary. Fragility is not the absence of strength. Sometimes, it is the reason strength evolves. And across the coalition's vast territories, one conclusion quietly reshaped interstellar perception. The species once considered least capable of surviving the galaxy's harshest environments had become one of its most reliable protectors.